Jen, how do you walk us through the events of the last 24 hours? Last night, a senior administration official on a background call with reporters briefed them on the administration's response and said that Russia's occupied these regions since 2014, and that Russian troops moving into the Donbass would not itself be a new step, and didn't use the word invasion this morning.
They are asking.
Invasion. The president is using invasion. What changed in the last 24 hours?
Oh my God!
What did you see on the ground that changed the U.S. government's assessment of what is?
Oh my God! They're literally. Oh shit!
Sure. Well, I'm not going.
That's
to,
a great question.
Exactly what you're asking, but just to set the precedent here, I'm not going to be confirming military movements from the podium now or at any point, probably. But what I can tell you is what we looked at is the events of the last less than 24 hours, Zeke, right? And what we have seen is President Putin setting up a rationale to take more territory by force. What we're basing that on, including the comments of the Deputy National Security Advisor this morning, and then the President's comments later in the afternoon, is a couple of things. One, Vladimir Putin announced yesterday that he was basically planning to carve out a chunk of Ukraine by recognizing 2 regions of Ukraine as independent. He brazenly asserted these regions are no longer part of Ukrainian sovereign territory. Last night, he authorized Russian forces to deploy into these regions. Today, he sought authorization from the Duma for the Russian military to use force outside of Russian territory. And today, he asserted that these regions actually extend deeper into Ukraine, claiming larger areas currently under jurisdiction of the Ukrainian government. So what we're seeing there, and as for anybody who read or paid attention to his lengthy speech last night, is the rationale to go much further. That is what we are also.
That wasn't the question. The question is why. If this is not invasion, like what has changed? Why is this not an invasion? Why was this an invasion? Is this an invasion that confirms your intelligence, or is this not an invasion then? You can't fucking say this is the invasion and then turn around and be like, actually, just kidding, this wasn't the fucking invasion. And all these dumbass chatters in my chat are like, no, actually, it was an invasion and you're fucking holding an L. But then also the American government is now saying it's not an invasion. So if that's not an invasion, so what is it?
The president, and we talked about this as well, warned Americans in the last several weeks that they should be prepared to bear the cost of standing up for Ukraine's sovereignty. There's been a lot of conversation about this, and I was hoping you could maybe speak to clarify this a little bit. Why should Americans, feel that they have to? That is a cost that they should have to bear, and that should affect their lives? And how much should they be prepared for this, geopolitical crisis to impact their day-to-day living?
Well, I think what hopefully the American people who are tuning into this or have been tuning into
she
this
basically
will
took
see
the
is that
long way to
President
fucking
of the
say,
United
well, actually, it's just day one, and Putin claimed he wants to take all over Ukraine, so the intelligence is still true.
The efforts of
It just
Russia
hasn't
to
happened
invade
yet, but it has
and
happened.
carve
That
out
is an
a chunk
invasion
of another country for their own. And that is, the world is standing with the United States against the actions of President Putin. Now, why does that matter? I realize that's what you're asking me. Why does that matter to the American people? That should matter because that is a fundamental value that we as a country stand up for, and we stand up against that type of action. That goes back to World War II, and we have repeatedly throughout history been leaders in the world in rallying support for any efforts to seize territory from another country. When the president spoke to the American people last week, it was very important to him to be very direct and clear and straightforward with them about what this could mean as we looked to what the impact of an invasion could mean and also what the impact of sanctions could mean. And the fact that standing up for values is not without cost, including in this case, including potentially in this scenario. Now, as Dileep just conveyed, what the president has said to his national security team is he wants to leave no stone unturned. He wants them to take every step possible to tap into the resources of global suppliers, to present to him any option that will reduce the impact on the American people. And even as
the thing I don't understand is like, why did it have to get to this point? Why couldn't they just like literally fucking get together in a goddamn room in that comically large fucking table, okay? And not just with Macron, but have France and Germany, and fuck it, America too, even though I feel like they would fuck up the conversations, and Ukrainian leadership, and hash it out.
We're never going to completely.
Minsk's so nice, they had to do it thrice, okay?
Secretary of State did that either.
Fuck it.
Just to
Why
build
not?
on what he just said,
Why did it have to get to Russia literally being like, we're recognizing the independence of these,
for him to have a meeting
we're recognizing the independence of these two areas, and we're putting troops there to defend them.
It's intended that any engagement with President Putin would follow that. So at this point, that is certainly not in the plans.
And what would it take to get that conversation back to the table, to reconsider a meeting between the two leaders?
Well, de-escalation. That's what it would take.
Which have you defined?
Macron tried.
De-escalation
Bro,
means
Macron
moving
has no
troops
fucking power
and
on his own. What do you
de-escalating
mean?
from
And they
what
spoke and then
the
Putin invaded anyway.
on a daily
That is a very interesting take. There's a very interesting turn of victim blaming. Wait, I'm not blaming Ukraine, you fucking idiot. I'm blaming America. What the fuck are you talking about? America
I
has
appreciate
never
your
been a
question.
fucking
I
victim.
understand,
Shut the
Leisha,
fuck
why-
up.
We are, of course, a very short period of time away from the end of the month of February. The president has not made a decision about who he's going to nominate, but I'm still not going to get into details about the internal process. More to tell soon. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Jen. The president said in the spring that
My man
Pentagon
said
generals
victim
had
blaming.
briefed
America,
him that
victim.
The greatest threat facing America is global warming. Is that still the assessment now that we are facing down a potential cyber war with Russia?
Well, let me first say there is no, we are always prepared for any threat that any outside.
Listen, bro, if Russia wants to fucking win this war, this cyber war at the very least, delete the fucking student loan debt, okay? Hack one of those things. You fucking assholes. Just do the right thing, okay? They listened to Donald Trump when he was like, hack my opponent, please. Hillary Clinton, where are the emails? So if they're listening, Russia, if you're listening, hack the student loan debt, okay? Do one
public here
thing
to
that's
convey
right.
And reiterate, the president has no intention of sending U.S. troops into Ukraine to fight in Ukraine. What we are doing is we are abiding by our obligations to our NATO allies and partners to ensure that they have the support and the resources that they need. And that is our right and our obligation as the United States.
Okay, and why do you guys think that sanctions are going to stop Putin if his goal ultimately is to redraw the map so it looks like it did 70 or 80 years ago? What sanction is going to stop him from doing that?
Well, I think just to kind of reiterate maybe something you touched on there, for anyone who watched his speech last night, what he made clear in that speech is that he doesn't even necessarily or doesn't recognize the independence of Ukraine as a country. And that certainly gives us an indication of where his
He pretty much said it's
intentions
the
are
West's fault
at
that Putin
this
invaded,
point in
it's his
time.
troops.
Sanctions can
That's not
be a
what I said.
powerful
That's what you
tool.
wanna
They have
hear.
been in
Shut
a
the
lot
fuck
of,
up.
Moments throughout history, and what we view them as or how we're viewing them as we're starting high, as Dileep just conveyed here, in terms of the significance and the severity of the sanctions that were announced today. Yes, our intention is to have a deterrent effect, and there are, what they have done to date is completely unacceptable. There's certainly far worse that could happen. What we want to do is prevent a large-scale invasion, death and destruction across Ukraine, devastation to the Ukrainian people. And that what happens with sanctions is they work over time. They're not an end. They're not intended to max out at the beginning. They're long-lasting and sustainable, and they're intended to squeeze. But if you look at what is happening now, what President Putin has stated as his intention is he wants to divide NATO. The opposite of that has happened, Peter. He also wanted a geopolitical project, Nord Stream 2, to go forward. That has not happened. He wants to make sure there is a vibrant economy for the Russian people. They're not on that track. So his intentions and his objectives are not playing out.
But so I guess to follow up on that, the president said before he got here that Putin knows if I am president of the United States, his days of tyranny and trying to intimidate the United States and those in Eastern Europe
they're
are
doing
over.
it!
It's 2.5 years later. He is intimidating the United States and those in Eastern Europe. What happened?
I'd hardly put it that way. I would look at it actually from the prism of the United States, and President Biden has rallied the world, rallied Europe to stand up against the efforts and the actions of President Putin. And we've laid out very clearly exactly.
$4 gas, $5 gas, however how you guys think it's going to go, something like that is not intimidating.
You asked me if we were intimidated by President Putin, and I think the evidence of that doesn't exist. Go ahead, Kristen.
Thank you,
Jen, if I could
I
have one
don't-
more time,
I think they
on
are, though.
sanctions.
Yeah.
The president of Ukraine on Saturday called on the United States and its allies to impose the toughest sanctions, and as all of these questions suggest, President Putin doesn't seem to be deterred at this point. Why not choke Russia out financially right now as a way to try to stop him?
I unironically feel like Trump would have been like, who cares about Donbass? Americans can't even point to it on a map. Give it to Russia. I think that's what Donald Trump would have done.
One,
for sure.
Not that they are going to be an end on their own. Just the announcement of sanctions is not going to have the immediate impact. They're not intended to work that way. They're not intended to max out at the beginning. This is why we've always intended to have a range of sanction steps that we could plus up to or escalate to if his behavior and his actions continue to be escalatory. And also, if we do all the sanctions now, what is the deterrent effect or impact of preventing him to take further action? That is what the conversation we've been in with the global community, and that is how we've been approaching it to date.
Senator Lindsey Graham says President Biden is missing the moment. Does he run the risk of being too cautious here with this tranche approach?
In what capacity is he missing the moment? Did
Lindsey
Senator
Graham-
Graham say?
I'll read you the entire
Okay, go
quote.
ahead.
This is a critical moment in history. President Biden is not seizing the moment. The sanctions outlined are woefully
Did he say that
inadequate.
before or after we announced the sanctions?
Saying this consistently.
Well, look, I think it's an important question because what the president announced was the sanctioning of two enormous financial institutions that is essentially going to make it more difficult for people close to President Putin and in the Russian elite to do business. And this is just the beginning.
When do you think they'll start to feel the impact? When will they feel the bite?
Well, they're going to be implemented immediately. So obviously it takes some time, but our effort and our focus is on implementing them immediately.
And going back to President Biden's statement that he wants to mitigate the impact on Americans, can you tell Americans how much pain will they feel with this first tranche?
Well, I think what we're looking at here, Kristen, is of course the impact on natural gas producers primarily is in Europe, and we're working to help them too, but also on the oil markets. And obviously there are many additional steps that President Putin could take, and what we're seeing is that he has every intention of taking, so I can't give you a projection of that. Some of it depends on what the actions are.
I think Americans will feel the impact in the coming weeks of these rounds.
Again, it really depends on what the steps are. What was announced today was significant sanctions on Russian elite and on financial institutions there. The people who will be largely impacted are in Russia on those.
Just try one more. SWIFT, not in this initial rollout.
Not in the initial tranche, but remains on the table.
Will it be in the next rollout if there needs to be another rollout?
I can't give you a prediction of that, but again, we have a range of options that remain on the table. Significant that would have a significant and devastating impact on the Russian economy. We've already seen in the Russian economy the impact on inflation there and on the markets there of the expectation of these sanctions. But all of those options remain on the table, and I can't make a prediction of what's next. Go ahead.
The president today used words like bizarre and twisted to describe Putin's remarks. Does the administration believe on what they saw in this speech yesterday, or in the last 24 hours, if you will, that Putin has shown some kind of change in his state of mind and his demeanor?
I wouldn't say we'd characterize it that way, Cecilia. I mean, if you, for those of you who read or watched his speech last night, which was rife with historical inaccuracy, of course, he made clear that he does not view Ukraine, not just the areas he recognized yesterday, but the totality of Ukraine as an independent country. And he conveyed that by providing a lot of revisionist history details that are not aligned with what has happened over the last few decades. Now, we've seen some of that rhetoric if you look back to 2008 and even before then, but it is indicative of of his own belief that he has the right that Russia, and he has the right to take the territory, to claim territory from another country, and we just don't agree with that, obviously.
If sanctions don't work,
I just realized like Jen Psaki is kind of doing what I do every day.
Well, sanctions can take a number
But
of
usually
formats,
she has a
right?
much better relationship with her gray names than I do.
We have at our disposal SWIFT. The SWIFT system is obviously significant, not in the first tranche, but there's a range of options that remain on the table for sanctions. And again, as Dileep conveyed, but I think this is an important component to know, is that they're not intended to have an impact on the first, the harshest impact on the first day. They're planned, or
I am congested, yes.
they're designed to have a squeezing impact over the course of time, and we have many more escalatory steps that we could take. Go ahead.
Do you have specific agreements with countries, exporters, to ensure Europe has a steady supply of gas, or is that still a work in progress?
I certainly understand your question. As Dileep said, it is a very sensitive time in the process right now, but what we're doing right now is talking both to major natural gas producers to understand their capacity and willingness to surge natural gas output, which of course is a regional issue that would have an impact in Europe, and also talking, as he said, to
Yeah,
a
fuck
range
Europe,
of,
though.
producers to help assess or help reduce
Like,
the market impact and the impact.
Fuck Europe, fuck Ukraine, obviously. Who cares? Like, we'll fucking beef it up. We'll talk a big game. We'll just lie. We'll fucking do whatever the fuck we want to do.
That's what we want.
We'll go to Putin, and then Putin will call our fucking bluff. And then after that, fuck Europe. Fuck the international community getting absolutely cumstered by this. Is ultimately, hey, America gets to fucking weaken a foreign adversary, baby. And maybe even replace Russia as someone who could potentially, offer some natural gas to Europe. Who knows?
Not in the plans anymore. Can you help paint a picture of what exactly diplomacy looks like in terms of dealing with Russia?
Well, first, the door to diplomacy still remains open, and it just as
Putin
I think
apologist take is not a
Secretary
Putin
of State
apologist
conveyed, it
take.
isn't the appropriate time as Russia is taking escalatory steps.
Of course, Putin is still at
and
fault for
preparing to
invading
invade,
fucking
for him to
Donbass,
meet with
okay?
the foreign
You're like,
minister.
yes.
And it had always been the intention that any engagement with President Putin would be discussed there and potentially follow there, but there were never any specific plans or timeline really in the works for that. So it was really going to be discussed at that meeting. What diplomacy looks like, one, we're going to continue to engage with our European partners, of course, and we will continue to
Can you encourage male chatters to try not to send dick pics to female chatters, please and thank you? Please immediately report who the fuck did that to you, and we will destroy them. Not only will we fucking literally ban them from the community, obviously, but also ban them. Please also provide proof as well. But we'll get them IP banned from Twitch as well. That's completely unacceptable. I don't like the tone that you're taking to make it seem like, this is something that I've like allowed ever. Or this is something that's like gone unnoticed despite numerous people telling me about it. But ultimately, let us know and we'll fucking absolutely destroy them. Oh, really? How do I do that? Like, look at who the moderators are in the chat. Like, if you reach out to a single one of them, they will immediately fucking both report it to, whisper one of the moderators, and they have green swords next to their names.
these type of financial institutions back in 2014, and it took several weeks to sanction these type of institutions.
But more in terms of the theory of the case, that instead of doing it in pieces where you start and then continue to add on the lessons that Jake and others have signaled, was that you start high and stay high instead of doing it more piecemeal.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. So the announcement that was made today about these financial institutions is more significant than what was done in 2014. And we would only build further from here. So that is starting high and staying high. Go ahead.
What Russian actions would trigger the fullest extent of U.S. sanctions?
I'm just not going to detail what exact reaction will be to each action. Obviously, we have a range of options at our disposal. They're all remain on the table, and our preference is, of course, de-escalation, not instituting more sanctions.
Is the administration confident that sanctions and export controls can or will be enough to deter Putin? And can you go into any more detail about what those export controls might look like?
I can't go into more specifics, just a range of options are on the table, and obviously export control actions would have a significant additional impact on the economy.
Putin sympathizer.
In terms of...
Glad you
Tell me the first part of
removed
your
that
question
stupid
again.
text banner.
Is
Dude,
the
are you kidding me?
administration confident that sanctions and export controls can deter Putin? Are they
Well,
enough?
part of what sanctions are is they're intended to be a deterrent, but they are also intended to have
Dumbass.
a squeezing significant impact on the economy that is felt over a sustainable period of time that makes it more difficult to continue those behaviors and those actions.
Hey, the video is over now. But if you enjoyed that, why don't you like, comment, and subscribe? And if you want to see more of that, just go, well, YouTube's got it around here somewhere.